Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Nice to see you again after a little bit of a break from making videos. I need that sometimes. Uh, I feel like anytime I talk to y'all, I'm always processing something. Story of my life. But I am processing some deep stuff right now, specifically related to mother wounds, stuff related to my mother, the idea of motherhood, as well as Mother Earth and my connection with Mother Earth and how that, mm, I guess, connects to how other people connect with the Earth as well. As you can see, I have some kyanite and some clear quartz on the same thing. I typically don't do things like that, but once in a while I'll be guided to wear two stones at a time. That was the case this time, so that's why I'm doing it. It's helping a lot with my throat expansion, which has actually been very painful. Higher heart throat expansion, it's been actually quite painful. So I'm wearing things like this. I'm also wearing things like tanzanite, celestite to help with that expansion of the higher heart and the throat. And it helps sometimes. So, but today I wanted to talk about some specific things like the process of transmutation, specifically transmuting fear into love and what that means. But what I want to mention first in regards to mother wounds is for anyone who is a mother or who will become a mother, or even someone who is reflecting on their own relationship with their mother. It's just something to either reflect what you're feeling or to just kind of give you a sense of insight into this idea. I feel as though it's very common for there to be this idea of motherhood as being like mothers being so loving and unconditional and compassionate, but I feel like a lot of this is primarily an idea, and the reality is much different. And I say this because I can almost assure you that so many people, including myself, have had experiences where they have not felt unconditionally loved and accepted by their mothers or mother figures. I think this is more common than we think. But I do think that motherhood is highly romanticized. I feel like it's put on a pedestal in the sense that we have an idea of what it's like, but the reality is very different in the experience for the mother and the child. And I think that needs to be talked about a little bit more. But what I wanted to say in regards to this is that if you as a mother are saying that you love your child, and yet you do things which are not loving or are not rooted in that unconditional love, just know that your child is going to notice that. They're absorbing that into their body, into their being, into their emotional, mental being. And this is something that they may not be able to cope with in a beneficial way. They'll do their best to kind of work through it or deal with it, because a lot of times as children, we don't know how to deal with when our parents, in this case our mothers, say they love us but do things that are unloving because they don't know how to express love in a pure way. They do it in the way that they know how because of what they've experienced and what their perceptions of love are and what it means to be a loving mother, how that translates, and how you're supposed to act if you're a loving mother. But I want you to know, if you say you love your child, then one of the most loving things that you could do for your child is really have a look at yourself and how you feel about love, how you embody it, how you express it. Because if you say that you love someone, especially your child, but you do things that are unloving, let's say You don't accept them. You don't allow them to be who they are. They're not allowed to have an opinion. They're not allowed to feel how they feel. I know for myself and also a lot of black and brown women, that's actually a very common thing is for us to feel growing up that we weren't allowed to have a voice. We weren't allowed to have an opinion. And if we had feelings, we would be punished for those feelings, depending on what they were. And in those cases, it creates distance and it creates confusion. It creates a rift between the child and the mother. And it's something that as the child continues to grow and evolve as a person and a being, that's something that they're going to have to deal with. It becomes part of their mother wound, and they have to work through that. And I feel like this is important because, again, we have this idea of what it means to be this loving mother and what it means to be a mother, and this idea of a mother holding a child and just being this ultimately unconditionally loving figure. But what is actually happening? What are we saying to our children? How are we treating our children? What are we instilling into them? The thing is, like, we're all individual souls and we'll all have things that we have to deal with. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation in the sense that no one can be perfect. So, I think if you have kids, you're gonna hurt them in ways that you don't mean to, and they're gonna have to learn how to deal with that. But I do think there are ways that you can mitigate that or soften the blow a bit by whether you apologize, whether you acknowledge you're wrong, you express your love in healthy ways. There are ways to kind of like soften the blow a bit, but not everyone does that because sometimes parenthood can make you feel as though you're never wrong and that you've never done anything wrong, and as long as a child is a child, you're always right if you're an adult. And that's not cool. So I wanted to say that before I get into the main topic that I wanted to talk about. It's already been over 7 minutes I've been talking about this. But I do think it is important to reflect on that, whether as a mother or an adult that has been a child. Okay? So I wanted to share that really quick. But what I wanted to talk about as the main topic was this idea of transmuting fear into love, talking about that a little bit more. What inspired me to talk about this was a post that I saw on a group that I'm a part of, where someone was asking about what does it mean to transmute fear into love? And I think it's a good question because I think that when it comes to the spiritual world and spiritual community, a lot of stuff is very kind of generalized, and we don't get that nuance. We don't get that intricacy sometimes that we need in order for us to really be able to make things click and for us to understand things. So I wanted to talk about it more and help y'all to really just have a better idea of how you can move through your fears and transmute them into love. Like, what does that mean, right? So I guess what I'll start by saying in this vein is how I've seen people translate this, transmuting fears into love. People will say things like, basically, if you're feeling fear, choose love, right? If you're feeling fear, choose love. Sometimes what that means for them would be to say loving affirmations or affirm the love that you are. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. It's actually a good practice, but we have to be mindful of this in that we're not using loving affirmations as a way of avoiding our fears or trying to stuff them down. So sometimes we may feel fear and then we'll be like, okay, let me say these loving affirmations so that the fear will go away. We want to be careful of that. That's not the practice that we could try it, but I highly doubt it's really going to work. We can try it as an experimentation. I mean, I appreciate loving affirmations. I think they work well as to kind of build your core foundation of just kind of like your perspective of where you fit in with the energy of love. Because that is what you are on a deeper level and even more. So affirming that is a good general practice. But when you're in the midst of these is like experiences where fear comes up, we don't want to use those affirmations to kind of disregard what we're feeling or as a way to try to cancel it out. We don't want to cancel out our fears. We want to allow our fears to really show us what they need to show us. Okay. So now let's talk about just my perspective on transmuting fear into love. I would say, and I actually replied to the person on the group and said this, that you transmute fear into love through love. This is the idea of transmutation to begin with, is when you are going through the process of transmutation, what helps transmute something from one element into another is the introduction of an element that has a higher vibration or a faster vibration frequency, whatever. You need the introduction of something higher or something that can basically refine that first component or first element. So if you're dealing with something like fear, the introduction of love into the equation is important for helping to, transform that fear into something different. Okay? So how do you do that? How do you transmute fear into love? Well, you introduce love into the equation, and you do that by allowing yourself to be loved in the midst of your fear. So if you're feeling fear, what that means is that you allow your fear to be what it is. You allow yourself to feel it. You allow yourself to experience it fully without judging it, without trying to get rid of it, without trying to make yourself feel bad for feeling it. And we have to be mindful of our own perceptions of fear. And a lot of times it's subconscious, and that we don't realize we're trying to get rid of fear because we feel like it's a bad thing or we're not supposed to feel it. So that's something that we have to be aware of, right? So when we introduce love and compassion into this experience of fear, it gives us that space and permission to feel that fear without feeling like we have to conquer it. I know it's a very common thing, but like, conquer your fears, conquer them, which means we have to try to overcome them. That process, yes, that does happen. We will do that, but if you focus too much on trying to overcome your fear, you almost create a resistance to it, or you can almost amplify it by trying to conquer it. So get rid of the need to conquer it and allow yourself to be okay with feeling discomfort for a little while, knowing it'll be temporary. It's not going to be there forever. So a loving perspective is allowing yourself that space to feel your fear completely and fully without judging it, judging yourself, without judging yourself, and without trying to get rid of it. All right? So allow the fear to be what it is, where it is, for as long as it needs to be there. Okay? What you'll notice is that when you do that, so when you introduce this loving, compassionate perspective into your fear, you feel it as much as you can, but what you'll notice is that little by little, it'll start to dissipate. Depending on how strongly rooted your fear is, where it's coming from, that will make the time period vary, of course. But you'll notice that over time, as you heal more stuff, what may start out as like the fears hanging around for a long time, it'll actually start to get shorter and shorter because you're tying up more loose ends, you're clearing things out. So, and a lot of times fears are intermingled and tangled with other ones. So you'll find that the more that you streamline your energies within, the less that any fears that come up will have to grab onto, right? So by integrating this loving perspective and allowing yourself to be in the fear starts to dissipate. And what'll happen is you'll start to have like a break in the clouds a little bit. My ears ringing. My ears have really been doing some crazy stuff, y'all. I'm a little nervous, but anyway, you'll notice a break in the clouds eventually, okay? And where, let's say you're trying to get perspective on a situation, but you're afraid to tap into it and see what's going on. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you'll have a break in the clouds where the fear will either start to dissolve, or you'll get to a point where you're like, you know what? I'm tired of being scared. Let's just confront this. Let's just do it. So you see the difference between doing it this way and doing it by way of trying to force yourself to confront a fear because you're trying to get rid of it. One is trying to override what you feel, and one is moving through what you feel, allowing yourself to feel it fully. And then at some point, you get to this point where you're like, you know what? I'm tired of being afraid now. Let's just do this. Let's confront this. Let's move on. Okay. And you have to have patience with yourself through this process, because you may kind of like almost like a clam, open up a little bit, shut a little bit, open up more, and then shut a little bit. Allow for that kind of back and forth a little bit. At some point, because you're giving yourself that space and permission and that love to feel what you feel, and you've allowed yourself to kind of come to this time of acknowledgement organically, it'll be easier for you to confront whatever it is, you know, without feeling that force or push to do it, you know, outside of what you feel is right for you. Okay? So this is where the process of transmutation is happening, is once you do that, you're able to gain the wisdom that the fear is trying to show you, trying to give you, the information. There's always fear. In fear, there's always information or wisdom that wants to be shared. So you may find that at some point, you get to this point of clarity where you're like, okay, this fear was rooted in something old, and this isn't even really serving me anymore. This is something from 10 years ago. This isn't even something that's from the now. This is something from a long time ago. Or you might find that this fear is, I don't know, rooted because you don't know what's going to happen next. You know, oh, I want that light from my laptop. Lights everything up. It's I don't know. I just don't know what's going to happen. So I'm afraid. And then, I don't know, maybe you'll confront that by way of just coming into prayer and feeling more in touch with your spirit team. There's so many ways that this can go. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when you get to the point of clarity, of wisdom, and you get that information and you can apply it properly, now you've transmuted that fear into love, in the sense that you have greater wisdom and greater clarity of what's really going on, and you're able to become more aligned with who and what you truly are, and what actions you need to take based off of that. Okay? So, the love isn't really, when we say transmuting fear into love, you may not necessarily feel, oh, I just feel so much love in my heart. You may not feel that. But it's love in the sense that it's an energy that is that permeates through everything. We've talked about love already. And when it's there's love in like a relationship love, and then there's the energy of love that's within everything. It's the energy of basically of divine source, right? Because it's in everything. It's the substratum of creation is what I've called it. I consider love to be an element. Love is its own element. You know, so basically when you're transmuting fear into love, you're transmuting fear into, let's say, I'm trying to figure out like a better, like a word that's more accurate. Wisdom, deeper understanding, but all of that is you. Greater clarity, understanding of yourself. So you're basically taking that fear and letting it show you more of who you are as a being, as a child of the universe. right? So I hope that this makes sense. I hope that this helps you in your practice, in your daily life. That's the last point that I'll make, is that this is why it's very important to have a spiritual practice, is the more that you stick to that spiritual practice, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing day in and day out, but doing things that feel right for you, is that it builds your cone or your pillar of light in the center of your being, and allows you to move through things like when fears come up and doubts come up much easier, is because you have that as a steady base, okay? And it's not taking over you. Little by little, you notice that fears don't take over you the same way as they did previously. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I send you all so much love, and I'll keep you posted on any events or offerings that come to me and I want to share with you all. But thank you so much. Sending you so much love. Take care. Bye-bye.